Hi, I'm Jeff Murrah. I want to welcome you to True Texas History. Today's episode I entitled Picking a Fight, the Mexican War. Um, Part of the reason I chose that title is that when I read about the Mexican-American War, I'm reminded of that line in Braveheart where they asked the main character what he was fixing to do, and he was going out to pick a fight. And in many ways, the war with Mexico amounted to picking a fight, and I'm going to go into that. Let me go ahead and start off. Today is May the 13th, and May the 13th, 1846, is when the United States Congress officially declared war on Mexico. But there's a lot more to the story than that. We're going to get to that. Well, let's start with the elections of that had come up in 1844, 1840, well, more like 1846. In Texas, the man running for president was Anson Jones. He defeated his opponent, and one of his slogans was peace with the world and independence, or annexation and its contingencies. Now, on the U.S. side, you had James Knox Polk, who was running, and his big thing was the annexation of Texas. And he pushed that, and he managed to get elected. Now, both men, Jones and Polk, were elected, and then a lot of shenanigans started going down. And all this does have bearing on the war with Mexico, because what was going on, first of all, the United States had sent a representative down to Mexico to attempt buying Texas and what they called Mexican California. They had their eyes on California. They wanted it, and they attempted to buy it. Mexico was not interested in selling, and actually Mexico took offense and sent the ambassador packing. They did not take kindly to that whole idea. The thing is, the U.S. wanted trade with China, and they were determined to go ahead and get that trade. Now, these days, with all this, the crazy theories that are out there, I've seen it promoted that the war with Mexico was about slavery. No, it wasn't. It was about getting access to California. It was about mercantilism. It was about this whole idea of the United States having manifest destiny. They believed it was their destiny to go from coast to coast, for that to be their nation, and them to rule the waves, the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific as well. At that time, they did not have that Pacific side, and they wanted it, and wanted it bad. Now, to understand the Mexican War and what happened, it's going to be important to have a timeline, because a lot of history books either give you false dates, at least that's what I have found, or they don't lay out the timeline to where you can make sense out of everything. One of the things that happened when we go with the timeline in 1845, keep in mind, Texas did not join the United States until the end of December the 29th, 1845. So back in April, which was quite a few months before, the order was given for U.S. forces to move into Texas. So the order was given, and it just so happened that the illegitimate Ninth Texas Congress voted to approve the whole annexation deal with the United States in July. That same month, those U.S. troops that had been ordered in April to come to Texas started arriving in Corpus Christi. Now, kind of fishy. Well, President Jones smelled a rat. President Jones said, hey, United States, you need to quit bribing our congressmen with what's going on. We need to have fair elections with everything. And but his complaints weren't listened to, and some agents were sent by the United States government to come down to Texas and remove any barriers to annexation. I believe there were 3 of those agents, and there may have even been more, because the bodies of 2 U.S. agents from about that time were found buried in Galveston. But anyways, they came down here. They did things like bribe the Republic of Texas Secretary of State to ask for the United States protection. Now, the U.S. Army sent what is called the Army of Occupation. And let me show you a picture from my book. See, that's the Army camp outside of Corpus Christi. 10,000 men sent to Texas. Now, bear in mind, the people of Texas have not voted for annexation. That does not come until October. It hasn't even been on the ballot. Something fishy going on here. So, and a lot of money going on now. With 10,000 U.S. troops here and troops stationed at other places throughout the Republic of Texas, they had the election in October. Gee, when you've got that many military troops, what's the likelihood that it's going to be a free election? Good question. Anyways, they voted to go ahead and join the Union. Now, the President of the United States at that time, or President-elect at that time, it was James Knox Polk, he wanted some of this territory that belonged to Mexico, and he was determined to get it. So he did things like, one, he sent the U.S. Navy to Veracruz to, quote, fly the flag, essentially show them we can get to you and you can't get to us. And then he had this army down there on the border to, he instructed General Zachary Taylor to build a fort. And he did, Fort Texas, which was later changed to Fort Brown. But Fort Texas was built just inside the range of the guns of the Mexican forces at Matamoros. Now, what kind of military commander builds a fort within range of the enemy's guns? Kind of fishy. So he builds the fort. The Mexican commander says, don't do that. You're asking for trouble. He goes ahead and does it anyway. And then while they're building the fort, Zachary Taylor sends some of his raw recruits out to go and locate the position of the Mexican forces, which they did. They encountered the Mexican forces. A military engagement breaks out. There's firing on each other. And all of a sudden, the president has justification for war. Now, after that episode, there were also 2 other battles. On May the 8th, the Battle of Palo Alto. On May the 9th, the Battle of Rosica de la Palma, and some people see this as one big battle, but it was two separate engagements. In both engagements, the United States had smaller numbers than the Mexican forces, yet due to the superiority of their weapons and cannon, managed to win those engagements. And then finally, on the 13th, war was declared. So here we were in a hot shooting war with Mexico, the armies fighting each other, cannons, rifles, everything blazing, and war hadn't even been declared. That's why it's important to, when you're studying the Mexican-American War, to do a timeline of all the events leading up to it. Because Polk knew what he was doing. I mean, he sent that army force down here, even titled it the Army of Occupation. He knew what he wanted to do, and he wanted to provoke things so that they could get their war. Now, with that whole episode, it did lead to the United States managing to seize a lot of territory. I found it interesting. I found a map, and it's in my book, and I'll show you this. If you notice this map, this is a map from 1844 produced by the State Department. You have Texas, which you see, and then you also have the state of California and Utah Territory. At that time, in 1844, this was Mexican. This was part of Mexico. Why is the State Department already carving it up into states and territories when it doesn't even belong to them? That's a good question. This is why, looking at old maps can sometimes reveal more to the story than what you may have been aware of. So when you read your doctored history books about the start of the Mexican-American War and its involvement with the annexation of Texas, hopefully you'll read it with a grain of salt and look at it a little differently now, because this is one of those areas where things have been rearranged and cleaned up so that you don't get the full story. Hope you enjoyed this today. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to leave them below. I'll be glad to get to them. And we'll see you next time. Until then, vaya con Dios, my friends. Goodbye.